own sister called her trash and threw $20 at her feet. Now Mary Sullivan stood in a raging storm, ankle broken, 3 hungry sons crying behind her. She knocked on a stranger's door expecting nothing. What happened next changed her life forever. The wagon wheels creaked as Mary Sullivan guided her tired horse along the dusty Montana trail. Behind her, 3 young boys sat huddled together, their faces marked with exhaustion and hunger. The youngest, 5-year-old Samuel, had stopped asking for food hours ago. His silence worried Mary more than his complaints ever had. It was the autumn of 1882, and Mary had been traveling for nearly 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she buried her husband Robert in a small cemetery outside of Kansas City. 3 weeks since her entire world collapsed around her. Robert had been a good man, a blacksmith who worked hard to provide for his family. But the fever that swept through their town showed no mercy. It took Robert in just 4 days, leaving Mary with 3 sons, a mountain of debt, and nowhere to turn. Her only hope had been her sister Eleanor, who had married a wealthy merchant in Helena, Montana. Mary had written to Eleanor immediately after Robert's death, explaining her desperate situation. Eleanor's response had been brief, but seemingly welcoming. "Come to Montana. We will discuss arrangements when you arrive." Those words had given Mary hope during the long journey westward. Now, as the wagon approached the outskirts of Helena, Mary felt her heart beating faster. Soon she would see her sister. Soon her boys would have warm beds and full bellies. Soon this nightmare would be over. The Sullivan family arrived at Eleanor's grand house just as the sun began to set. Mary smoothed her worn dress and tucked stray hairs beneath her bonnet. She wanted to appear respectable despite the hardships of travel. "Boys, remember your manners," she instructed her sons. 12-year-old James nodded solemnly. He had taken on the role of little man since his father's passing. 9-year-old William fidgeted with his shirt buttons, while Samuel simply stared at the big house with wide eyes. Mary knocked on the ornate wooden door. Moments later, a servant appeared and led them into a formal parlor. The room was filled with expensive furniture and delicate decorations. Mary's boys stood frozen, afraid to touch anything. Eleanor entered the room like a queen greeting unwanted subjects. She had changed much since Mary last saw her 10 years ago. Her dress was made of fine silk, and jewels sparkled at her throat, but her eyes were cold. "Mary," Eleanor said, offering no embrace. "You actually came." "Of course I came. Your letter said." "My letter said we would discuss arrangements." Eleanor interrupted. "I did not promise anything." Mary felt a chill run down her spine. "Eleanor, we are family. These are your nephews. Surely you can find room for us until I can establish myself." Eleanor laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. "Establish yourself? Doing what, Mary? You have no skills, no money, and 3 children to feed. My husband is a respected merchant. We cannot have poor relations living under our roof." "What would people say?" "People would say you helped your widowed sister in her time of need," Mary replied, her voice trembling. "I am helping you." Eleanor reached into her pocket and produced a small envelope. "There is $20 here. It should be enough to get you settled somewhere else. Perhaps in one of the smaller towns. Your kind of people would fit in better there." Mary stared at the envelope in disbelief. "My kind of people? Eleanor, we share the same blood. We shared the same blood. But I have risen above my circumstances, Mary. You clearly have not." Eleanor gestured toward the door. "Now please leave. My husband will be home soon, and I would prefer he not see you here." James stepped forward, his young face flushed with anger. "You cannot treat our mother this way." Mary placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "Hush, James." She took the envelope from Eleanor's outstretched hand. Her pride screamed at her to throw it back, but her children needed food. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "I hope you never know the desperation I feel today," Mary said quietly. and I hope your conscience allows you to sleep tonight." Without another word, she gathered her sons and walked out of Eleanor's grand house. The door closed firmly behind them, and Mary heard the lock click into place. Night had fallen completely by the time Mary drove her wagon away from Helena. She had no destination in mind, only the need to put distance between herself and her sister's cruelty. The boys had fallen asleep in the wagon bed, exhausted from the emotional upheaval. Mary drove on through the darkness, tears streaming silently down her face. Around midnight, a violent thunderstorm erupted. Rain pounded down, turning the road to mud. The horse stumbled and struggled to pull the wagon forward. When lightning struck a nearby tree, the terrified animal reared up, snapping one of the wagon's wheels. The wagon lurched sideways, throwing Mary from her seat. She landed hard in the mud, pain shooting through her ankle. Her boys woke up screaming, "Mama! Mama!" Samuel's frightened cries cut through the storm. Mary pulled herself up, ignoring the pain in her ankle. "I am here, boys. Everyone stay inside the wagon." But the wagon was tilting dangerously, and rain was pouring in through the canvas cover. They could not stay there. Through the sheets of rain, Mary spotted a light in the distance. A house, perhaps half a mile away. It was their only chance. "James, help your brothers. We need to walk to that light." The small family struggled through the muddy darkness. Mary limped badly, using William's shoulder for support. Samuel clung to James's back, too tired to walk on his own. The rain soaked through their clothing, chilling them to the bone. After what felt like hours, they reached a wooden fence surrounding a ranch house. The light came from a window, warm and welcoming against the storm's fury. Mary pushed through the gate and half crawled up the porch steps. With the last of her strength, she knocked on the door. Silence, then footsteps. The door swung open, revealing a tall man holding a lantern. He appeared to be in his late 30s, with dark hair streaked with gray and weathered features that spoke of years working under the sun. His blue eyes widened at the sight before him. A soaking wet woman, barely able to stand, surrounded by 3 shivering children. "Please," Mary whispered, "please help us." Thomas Ward had seen many things in his 40 years of life. He had survived the war between the states. He had buried his wife to cholera 8 years ago. He had built this ranch from nothing with his own 2 hands. But he had never seen anything quite like the desperate family standing on his porch. Without a word, he reached out and scooped up the smallest boy, who was shaking violently. "Get inside, all of you, now." The family stumbled into the warm house. Thomas kicked the door shut against the storm and set the little boy down near the fireplace. "Boys, get out of those wet clothes. There are blankets in that chest." He pointed across the room. "Ma'am, sit down before you fall down." Mary collapsed into a chair near the fire. Now that she was safe, the last of her strength deserted her. Thomas moved quickly and efficiently. He stirred up the fire until it blazed hot. He brought out blankets and wrapped them around the shivering children. He heated water for tea and found bread and cheese for the hungry boys. Only when everyone was warm and fed did he turn his attention to Mary. "Your ankle," he said, kneeling beside her chair. "May I?" Mary nodded weakly. Thomas gently removed her mud-caked boot and examined the swollen joint. "Not broken," he announced, "but badly sprained. You will not be walking properly for at least a week." "We cannot impose on you for a week," Mary protested. "If you could just help us fix our wagon wheel." "In this storm? At night? With a sprained ankle?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I may be just a simple rancher, but even I know that is foolish talk. But we are strangers. You do not know us." Thomas looked at the 3 boys, who had fallen asleep in a pile of blankets near the fire. Samuel's thumb had found its way into his mouth. William had his arm wrapped protectively around his little brother. James was fighting sleep, trying to stay awake to protect his family. "I know enough," Thomas said quietly. "I know you are a mother who walked through a storm to find shelter for her children. I know those boys have not had a proper meal in days. And I know that anyone who turns away a family in need does not deserve to call himself a man. Tears welled up in Mary's eyes. After Eleanor's cold rejection, this stranger's kindness overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. No thanks necessary. Now drink your tea and rest. We will figure out everything else in the morning." Morning came with clear skies and warm sunshine, as if the storm had never happened. Mary woke to the smell of bacon cooking and the sound of her sons laughing. She limped to the kitchen doorway and stopped in surprise. Thomas stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while Samuel sat on the counter beside him, chattering away. And then the horse got scared and broke the wheel and Mama fell in the mud. But she got up because Mama always gets up, and then we walked forever and ever. "Samuel," Mary interrupted gently, "let Mr. Ward cook in peace." Thomas turned and smiled. It transformed his serious face, making him look years younger. "The boy is fine. He has been keeping me entertained with the story of your adventures." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready. I should be cooking for you, not the other way around." "With that ankle? Sit down, Mrs. Sullivan. That is an order." Mary sat, watching in amazement as this rough rancher served pancakes to her sons with surprising gentleness. James and William ate eagerly, their table manners forgotten in their hunger. After breakfast, Thomas sent the boys outside to explore the ranch while he and Mary talked. "Tell me your story," he said simply. So Mary told him everything: her husband's death, the debts, the journey to Montana, Eleanor's rejection. By the time she finished, she was crying again. Thomas listened without interruption. When she finally fell silent, he spoke. "Your sister is a fool, but her foolishness is my good fortune." Mary looked up, confused. "This ranch is 300 acres, Thomas explained. "I have 50 head of cattle, 20 horses, and more work than one man can handle. I have been trying to hire help for months, but nobody wants to work this far from town." "What are you saying?" "I am saying I need help, and you need a home. Your boys are young, but they can learn ranch work. You can manage the house and help with the books. In exchange, you will have room and board for as long as you need." Mary stared at him. "You are offering us jobs. You do not even know us. I know you walked through a storm for your children. I know your oldest boy stayed awake all night watching over his family. I know enough." Thomas paused. "Mrs. Sullivan, I am not offering charity. I am offering opportunity. There is a difference." Mary thought about her options. She could take Eleanor's $20 and try to start over in some strange town. She could continue west, hoping to find something better. Or she could stay here, on this ranch, with a man who had shown her more kindness in one night than her own sister had shown in a lifetime. "Yes," she said finally, "we will stay." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Mary's ankle healed, and she threw herself into her new role with determination. She cleaned the neglected house from top to bottom. She organized Thomas's chaotic paperwork. She planted a garden and started tending chickens. The house that had been merely a shelter became a true home. The boys flourished under Thomas's patient guidance. James learned to ride horses and help with the cattle. William discovered a talent for fixing broken equipment. Even little Samuel had his chores collecting eggs and feeding the barn cats. Thomas watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. His empty house was now filled with laughter and life. Meals were no longer lonely affairs but cheerful gatherings where everyone shared stories from their day. He found himself looking forward to evenings on the porch, when the boys were in bed and he could talk with Mary. She was intelligent and funny, with a strength that amazed him. Despite everything she had suffered, she never complained. As winter approached, Thomas realized something that both terrified and thrilled him. He was falling in love with Mary Sullivan. Christmas arrived with a blanket of fresh snow. Mary had decorated the house with pine boughs and candles. She had spent weeks secretly knitting scarves for the boys and a warm sweater for Thomas. On Christmas morning, The family gathered around the tree Thomas had cut down from the nearby forest. The boys opened their presents with excitement, exclaiming over the new boots and wooden toys Thomas had purchased in town. Then Thomas handed Mary a small box. "For me?" she asked, surprised. "Open it." Inside the box was a simple gold ring with a small pearl. Mary gasped. "It was my mother's," Thomas explained nervously. "She would have wanted you to have it. That is, if you want it, if you want me." Mary looked up at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Thomas, what are you asking?" "I am asking you to stay. Not as my housekeeper or my employee, but as my wife." He took her hand in his rough, calloused ones. "I know I am not young or handsome. I know I cannot offer you fancy houses or silk dresses. But I can offer you my heart, Mary. I can offer you a home. I can offer those boys a father who will love them as his own." James, William, and Samuel watched with wide eyes. The older boys understood what was happening. Samuel just knew that everyone looked very happy. "Say yes, Mama," Samuel shouted. Mary laughed through her tears. She looked at Thomas, at his kind eyes and hopeful expression. She thought about the months they had spent together, building a life on this ranch. She thought about how safe he made her feel, how valued and respected. "Yes," she said, "yes, I will marry you." Thomas's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. The boys cheered and jumped around them. They married in the spring, when wildflowers covered the Montana hills. The ceremony was small, attended only by a few neighboring ranchers and the minister from town. Mary wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Thomas wore his best suit, which he had purchased specifically for the occasion. The boys stood proudly beside them, clean and scrubbed and wearing new shirts. As Thomas spoke his vows, Mary thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost so much: her husband, her home, her sister. She had arrived in Montana with nothing but her children and her desperation. But sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. She thought about that terrible night when she knocked on Thomas's door. She had expected rejection. She had expected to be turned away, as she had been turned away by her own blood. Instead, she had found kindness. She had found opportunity. She had found love. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced. Thomas took Mary in his arms and kissed her gently. Around them, their sons cheered and the neighbors applauded. Later that evening, as the sun set over the mountains and the boys played in the yard, Thomas and Mary sat together on the porch. He held her hand, playing with the gold ring on her finger. "Any regrets?" he asked. Mary leaned her head against his shoulder. "Only that I did not find you sooner." "You found me exactly when you were supposed to," Thomas replied. "Any earlier, and neither of us would have been ready." Mary considered this. He was right, of course. If she had come to Montana before Robert's death, she would never have knocked on Thomas's door. She would never have known this quiet, strong man who had opened his heart to her and her children. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones. "Thomas," she said softly. "Yes, thank you for opening your door that night." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for knocking." In the yard, James was teaching William how to lasso a fence post while Samuel cheered them on. Their laughter echoed across the ranch, mixing with the sounds of cattle and horses and the wind rustling through the grass. Mary Sullivan Ward smiled and closed her eyes. Yes. He was home.